the theme of what I'm going to be talking about is how to deal with messy data. See, the thing is, messy data is a reality. In fact, one would argue that this is the bulk of what we do when we process data, just clean it up. And from the variety of data sets that I've been cleaning, there are basically 6 steps that I've found that we need to take data through. The first is to effectively scrape the document, just get it into a form that you can start processing, and by and large, that's Pandas data frames. That's pretty much the de facto standard that we have today. And then you get it into the right kind of structure by fixing the rows. There's usually extra rows that you don't need, header rows, footer rows, totals. There's usually extra columns that you don't need, if at all you have the right column. Sometimes there's missing column headers, sometimes there's column misalignment, so you sort out all of those structures. And then you get into cleaning the content itself, the cells. Sometimes the values are missing. What do you do with those? Sometimes the values are misspelled, or the numbers have commas, or you have format problems with those. How do you deal with those? Sometimes you have a lot of data crammed into one data set. You have the full address, whereas what you really want is just the PIN code, or the city, or the state. How do you get specific pieces of information out of it? All of these are what go into cleaning data, after which you then analyze, aggregate, visualize, whatever you want. So what I'll do is pick a data set that I just started with yesterday. So this is, this is a report prepared by Credit Suisse on ABN AMRO. It's about a decade old, and it has, among other things, a breakup of ABN AMRO's businesses. So in their Netherlands business, what is the risk-weighted assets? What is the capital allocated? What was their profit in 2004, 2005, 2006, and so on, and a bunch of other pieces of information with subtotals such as operating businesses, the group information, and additional data such as shares outstanding and information on a per share basis. This is realistic data. This is how we often get stuff. What does it take to put this into a data frame that we can aggregate, analyze, and start doing calculations on? Let's play around with that. The first step is to scrape it. There are broadly 3 different ways in which you can pull data off of a PDF, assuming that it is structured. The first is to use a library such as Tabula. Tabula is a pretty decent library, and we'll be talking through that as our first approach. The second is to convert it to text. Get it into a reasonably formatted text structure, and if you're interested, I can show you how. But once you do that, then you're in the realm of text processing, and then you apply more techniques. It's more flexible. It can solve more problems than any library can, but it also means more work. The third, of course, is you sit and type, which is not a bad solution. Okay? Which is actually, in fact, a very reasonable solution. But in this case, let's start with Tabula. There is a Python version of Tabula. Tabula is actually a Java library. So if you have Java installed your machine and run pip install Tabula, it will import pip, it will install Tabula, and then you can import it. And then just like you do on Pandas, like with a read CSV, you read a PDF file. In this case, the PDF file is this ABN AMRO report that I have, and you can specify a variety of options. The option that I'm specifying is take this, which is from the 3rd page, not from the 2nd or the 1st page. And if there are multiple data frames, you can choose to pick multiple data frames as well. There's an option to extract multiple tables. So we have this, and you'll see some problems with this. The first is that the 2nd row has 2005 unallocated. That's what's coming in as the row here. It's effectively getting the 2nd row of the title as a content row. That's a problem. It obviously has rows like shares outstanding, per share. We don't really want all of those. So which brings us to the next step, which is to get rid of the extra rows in this data set. Now, that's at the very least. I mean, supposing I just set the index to the first column that's there, I can knock off the ones that we don't want. There was an empty row. So that's basically this one. I want to get rid of that. I want to get rid of the operating businesses because that's actually a subtotal. I want to get rid of group. I want to get rid of shares outstanding and per share. So we can just drop all of those rows. And what we have is a data set that at least has the correct rows. Simple enough. Let's go to the next step, which is fixing the column structure. Now, the titles of the columns that we have here leave a little bit to be desired. This one says RWA's capital net profit 1, net profit 2, net profit 3, whereas we know that the titles are actually capital allocated, net profit 2004, and so on. So we just replace it. There's no problem here. We say the column titles are actually whatever I decide them to be. And for what it's worth, we can also give the index a name here and say that these are the businesses. So now we have the data in the right structure. But at this stage, can we actually do computations on it? Let's see. Supposing I create a new cell. Let's get rid of this and start. I thought I could do this in IPython itself. Okay. So now that we have the data structure right, can I do something like data3.sum? That gets me nothing at all. Why is that? Because if I look at, let's say, the risk-weighted assets, even though these look like numbers, these are actually not numbers. That's 47,300 with a comma, and that's actually a string. So there's my next problem. Let's solve that problem. I'm missing a few. Okay, script, delete, column structure, handle missing values. Okay, yeah, before I get there, let's talk about missing values though. In the earlier data set, you saw that there's an NA here and there's an NA here. That's because in the original data, they had literally filled it with NA, indicating that the data is not available. There are also missing data points, like there's just nothing here. And we already have those tabulas already filled that with nans. So we have real missing values in the form of nans, and we have things that should be treated as missing values in the form of NAs. So let's handle those. First, we identify them. In this case, a manual scan tells us that it's only the letter NA, or the letters NA, that constitute missing value. However, I've seen data sets where it could be an empty string, it could be XX, XXX, numbers like 999. All of these also tend to indicate missing values. You've got to look carefully for what constitutes missing values. But then, once you have the missing values, what do you do with it? Possibility one, do nothing. If you're going to take totals of the columns, that's okay. Missing values can stay missing. If you're going to take averages, as long as the averages ignore the missing values on the numerator and the denominator, you're fine. There's no problem. But sometimes you do want to do stuff with it. You say, the missing values are distortions. I want to get rid of all those rows with missing values. I want to get rid of all the columns that only contain missing values. I generally don't recommend this strategy. If you have data, use it, but there are cases where it's appropriate. Sometimes it's also appropriate to fill it with a certain value. If I know that if it's missing, this is what it means. In this case, I know that in the bulk of the cases, if it's missing, it means 0, because these are actual numbers that total up. So it is the additive identity, which is 0. Or you may say, if I have an updated date column, I want to fill it by default with a created date column, because if it's missing, then there's no big deal. It's really just the same data. So I may be able to get it as a default from some other place. Or I may have some formula by which I compute. I could say, take the average of the data and fill it in there, take the median of the data and fill it in there. Or I may be able to look it up from an external data source. All of these are viable strategies for dealing with missing data. In our case, what I'm going to do is take the string NA and just replace it with nan and do nothing. That strategy works perfectly well in this particular scenario. Once we have the missing values sorted out, the next step is to standardize these values. Now, there are many kinds of non-standard values. You may have text that stores what should be numbers, what should be dates. The dates may have arbitrary formats. The text may have some suffixes. Let's say it has the title of a person's name, Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so. All of that information is something that just keeps coming up. And obviously, there's misspellings. Now, in our case, we don't really have misspellings, but we do have numbers with commas. So this is a straightforward way of handling it through regular expressions. Is there something that I should do? This is something that I can handle with regular expressions in a fairly straightforward way. To begin with, we replace all the commas with an empty string. Just get rid of the commas, we don't really need that. But also, there were scenarios where we had negative numbers. These negative numbers are enclosed in brackets. So if I have open bracket, 20, close bracket, that's really a negative number. For example, let's take this one. So that's minus 7,178. So we put in the regular expression that says, any number that's inside a pair of brackets, prefix it with minus and then put in the same number. So that converts numbers with brackets into negative numbers. Anything that ends with a percentage, like 16%, 19%, etc., just get rid of the percent. I know that the values is in percentage, I can later on divide it by 100. If I do all of these three, then I can convert it to a floating point value. And if I execute the sum of this, or let's just take data 5 itself, now I have the numbers represented as real numbers, and I can add them up on any axis that I want. Of course, this doesn't really make a difference, but so. With this, we have come to the fifth step, which is where we've been able to standardize the values. The last is to extract unstructured data, but in this particular case, it's not as if we have much by way of unstructured data. The only column that has any kind of unstructured data is the first one. But I do want to give you a feel for what this looks like. The idea that unstructured data can also be converted into structured data is a powerful one, and that's where the bulk of the meaning is. So let's see what this looks like with another data set. We're going to be switching this. But in the meantime, I'll take the opportunity to have a question from the audience. Give us some time. I'll cut down the questions towards the end.
Any questions, please?
Okay, a couple of questions, and you can just shout it out. You're close enough.
Does Tabula understand scanned images as well? Does it do OCR?
Tabula does not do OCR.
Okay.
Am I going to share this notebook? If someone reminds me, yes. Sorry.
Can Tabula recognize any PDF with any data? So there could be structured data in the middle, there could be something else, various tables, columns.
Assume that Tabula does a lot less than you think it does, to be safe. You'll probably have to do a lot of this manually. 1 out of 3 times you may get lucky. Otherwise, you'll have to process it manually. Yes, Tabula is consistent in the output that it generates. So if you have, let's take an example. There was this media company that said it's going to give us some data, and they said they're going to give it to us in PDFs. These PDFs were generated by some other system. The same system was generating every single PDF. So if we cracked one, we'd crack them all. So if Tabula can crack one, or you can tweak it with the parameters so that you can get it to crack one, it cracks them all, as long as it's by and large from the same source with the same structure. On the other hand, another company said, we'll give you data as PDFs. These are printouts, notionally PDF printouts from Excel sheets that have been created manually. The odds that one structure or one set of parameters will fit them all, very low. You can still get them into a data frame, but then subsequently, which columns to remove, which rows to remove, everybody has their own notions of how to prettify their own data. Putting in additional rows, putting in explanations and footers, putting in an extra column, deleting an extra column. When that happens, the post-processing becomes tougher, but at least the recognition is still possible. Let's move back on. So this is another data set that I found. It's a random data set that contains product dosages. So it contains a bunch of medicines and in what form the dosage is to be taken and the composition. So if I had to process this, then to begin with, we just load it. Now this is an Excel sheet. You can see that I just taken a screenshot from Excel. And on this Excel sheet, we do a few things. We, firstly, using Pandas Read Excel, get it into a data frame. We skip the first and the second row because that just contains an empty row and a title that we don't need. So we're really starting from the third row. And the columns are just fine. So that part is okay. But let's start looking at the columns. So I'm jumping straight into how we standardize the values. If you look at the dosage form column, it contains words like capsule, capsule, that's okay. It contains injection, it contains oil. But you'll notice that some of these are very similar. Each 1 ml injection contains, or let's take this one, each ml contain and each ml contains. That's way too similar. Or I have capsule here and injection and suspension spelled in small letters. These are corrections that we ideally want to make and say that tablet in small letters is the same as tablet in capital letters, right? The best way to do this is a fingerprinting algorithm. One library that implements a reasonable number of fingerprinting algorithms is Jellyfish. Let me talk you through that. So Jellyfish implements 4 fingerprinting algorithms: Metaphone, Soundex, NICES or however you pronounce it, and match rating codex. What does it do? Supposing I take the metaphone algorithm and apply it to tablet, it gives me the string TBLT. If I put tablets, it gives me TBLTS, but at least the case doesn't matter. Now let's take something, if I let's say tablet, then that's the same as tablet. Tablot, still the same as this. So a certain amount of misspellings it recognizes. This is a twist on the fuzzy matching algorithm. What we are not doing is saying, is string A approximately equal to string B? Because that requires pairwise comparisons. That's very inefficient, that takes n square computations. Instead, what we're saying is, I'm going to take a string and convert it to something simpler. And if two strings convert to the same simpler thing, then maybe they're the same. And there are many different ways of doing this, and this process is called fingerprinting. So if I apply fingerprinting to using Metaphone to the dosage form data, it gives me a whole bunch of fingerprints. And then I can group by that fingerprint. Just apply a group by, and then take that dosage form and see what are the distinct values. So among other things, applying this algorithm, that is Metaphone, it manages to identify that capsule spelled with and without capital letters is the same. But it misses out the fact that if there's an extra space, it is still the same. Now, maybe I should just do a pre-processing step to strip out these. Or I could try another algorithm. Let's take SoundX. What does SoundX do? Now, SoundX recognizes that capsule with or without a space is still the same. It also says these sound very much similar. Each ml contains, each ml contain, each 1 ml injection, each 5 ml contains. Now, whether these should be treated as the same or not is a subsequent question. But we have a set of algorithms that we can use to group these strings together and say they really represent the same value. And we can add this as a corrected version of the dosage form column. So that allows us to create a standardized value for the dosage form. Now, this, incidentally, is something that we can do for custom fingerprints. What I mean by custom fingerprints is you can define how you want to fingerprint your algorithm. The first time I encountered this problem was when I was building a quiz online. And this was in 2009. And my objective was to try and get people to play a song. So right now it's theoretically playing a song, but you can't hear it because the audio setup is not working. And let's assume that the first song was from Dil Se. If I type something wrong, like, let's say, Rang De Basanti. Rang De Basanti. You don't get it right, but if I type Dil Se, you start seeing it right. So the idea is, as the person types, do a fuzzy match. Now, the trouble with these is that there's a lot of different ways of spelling content. So if, for example, I use the word Vivah with a V or a W, what if I spell Madhuri the way she does or the way many other people do? What if I spell Zabardast with a J, which is how you would do it in the Hindi alphabet, as opposed to Z, which is the way you pronounce it? Now, what I used is literally this set of regular expressions that said, I don't care if Rahman is spelled with an E or an A. Treat most of the vowels as the same. I don't care if hai has an N at the end or not. I don't care if koi has a Y or not. Get rid of the Ys. Replace all the PH with an F because they're phonetically similar. And I tested this on a large number of Hindi movie names, Hindi actor names, singer names, and it seemed to work quite well. It was a reasonably good trade-off for this space. And using this, we built a system that says, okay, so if I fingerprint Meenakshi Dikshit and Meenakshi Dikshit spelled in two different ways, they both come to the same fingerprint. Similarly, Ye Dil Hai Mushkil spelled this way as opposed to this way still come out to be the same fingerprint. You can build your own fingerprint algorithms. It's fairly straightforward. Decide that some things are not important and get rid of them. That's all it takes to build a fingerprinting algorithm. And this can be pretty powerful. One of the biggest pieces of work that we did was when we took election data in 2014, historically, all the way from the 1951 elections till 2014, and said, can we look at who won in which constituency, which party won, how many candidates were contesting, all of those stats. The trouble was that the names of some of these constituencies were all over the place. To give you an example, Bhadrachalam was spelled in 3 different ways. Tughlakabad was spelled in 4 different ways. Rishivandiyam was spelled in 5 different ways. But the fingerprinting algorithms caught every single one of those, including some non-phonetic ones, like Uttakamand versus Uddakamandalam, blah, blah, blah. But this still didn't fix all of it. The biggest nightmare that we had was thanks to the delimitation, which happened in 2008. See, what happened was starting 1951, people said the size of each constituency should be roughly equal across all constituencies. In other words, we should have, if there are 500 people sitting in the Lok Sabha, each person should represent roughly an equal number of people. So redraw the constituency boundaries every time so that it's equal. And then family planning came in. And those states that were doing a good job of family planning said, look, if we do a good job, that means we get fewer seats in the Lok Sabha. Those that are doing a poor job get more seats in the Lok Sabha. So the central government said, okay, then as of 1976, we will stop all of this. The constituencies will remain frozen as of 1976 till 2000. Till then, you do your family planning properly. And then in 2000, they said, okay, we'll give you 26 years more extension. So until 2026, which is coming up now, delimitation is frozen. All states have an equal representation. But in 2002, they said, look, states can have constant representation, but at least let within the states, the boundaries be redrawn. That's okay. So they did that. And as a result, we suddenly had completely different constituency names. The biggest nightmare was a constituency called Machilipatnam, which suddenly emerged out of nowhere. Now, is this an existing constituency? Is this a new constituency? Now, it turns out that Machilipatnam has 2 different names. Masulipatnam, which comes from the Greek word muslin because of their trade, and Bandar, which comes from the Turkish word port. And there was a constituency called Bandar, which got renamed to Masulipatnam. Now, how am I going to use phonetics to figure this out? This is a legislative thing, right? Turns out, however, that data in itself can be used to clean this. What we did was looked at the total number of constituencies, the total number of candidates contesting in each constituency. So we here see Aland spelled in 2 different ways. People are standing for elections in Aland in 4 years and then suddenly stop standing for elections. They're standing instead for this spelling of Aland and then switch back here. But I can use this pattern and say that it just fits perfectly. So these 2, there's a good chance that they really are the same constituency. And similarly for Athani and Athani, BTM layout with or without the dot. And this is what finally got us to the fact that Bandar and Machilipatnam are likely to be the same constituency. Another way of clustering the data and getting it together. So standardizing values is a lot trickier and deeper than just phonetic matching. Fuzzy matching is just a starting point. But we can go pretty far along this route. The favorite approach these days is named entity recognition. Can I do a match against known entities? Or can I use ML in some way? It doesn't matter what. Whenever I say ML, the audience just lights up, right? So 5 years ago, I used to have a policy of saying the word big data 5 times in my talk. So I adopt a similar policy now. ML, 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 ML. I mentioned it sufficiently. So we'll move on. But the point is, one can overdo data cleansing. This is where XKCD had a cartoon about this guy saying, look, it's such a disaster. It's so messy in this ultra clean room. And I've seen clients say that. They say, we don't have clean data at all. What do you mean you don't have clean data? You know, sometimes when I see the total list of unique values of our product names, I have about 1,000 product names. Okay. But roughly what percentage of these are correct? 99.4% or 5%. 99.4% clean data is rock solid. 90% clean data is rock solid. As long as you have something above 50%, you know that it's not random, kind of. And if you have non-random input, there's a decent chance that it's non-random output. Garbage in, garbage out, true. But reasonably clean data in, reasonably clean data out, as long as you do reasonably good analysis. So a lot of people get worried. And so what we've been doing is trying to find one way of addressing this, which is by providing a diagnostic tool. We're working on an open source library called Data Audit. The idea is people should just be able to dump a data source into this, and it'll give them a score. And people will at least be able to say, this data is better than this data. And what the nature of the errors are is also something that it should ideally throw out automatically. We now have the rules that a human can execute to apply algorithmically a set of processes and get to the answer and get to a concrete score. What we don't yet have is all of this put into a program simply because we aren't there yet from an engineering perspective. But this is something that we'd love for you to pitch in. If you're interested, the repo is open. You can just start adding comments, issues, however you want to contribute. We'd be more than happy. If there's two takeaways that I want you to get out of this, it is that it is possible to write scripts, programs that automate data cleansing. Every single one of those examples that we went through is in Python and would work on the same kind of input data and automatically clean it without any human intervention. The second is that it's absolutely possible to overdo it, get to reasonably clean data, and then try and figure out what insights you get out of the data that you have. If it's useful, then come back and clean the data. Don't just sit and clean the data for its own sake. Enjoy cleaning up stuff. Take care.
Hi, Anand. So my question is mainly about fingerprinting names. So you mentioned about removing parts of it, but say someone has a middle name and it's not included or like abbreviated with a letter somewhere. Will general fingerprinting algorithms will still work?
Probably not. So the question is, if I have a complex name structure, sometimes with a middle name abbreviated, sometimes without, then will it work? No. And then you write a custom function. The trouble is actually even subtler than that. Until I went to my grad school, I didn't realize that Marathis usually use a last name, first name, middle name structure, not a first name, middle name, last name structure. And there are communities where in Andhra Pradesh, right, it's pretty much the address followed by your name that constitutes the full name. So naming structures also vary. Names are extremely complex. But what we can do is start getting into more and more fuzzy algorithms that say that, look, maybe this is a name match, maybe this is a name match, and then augment it to say, okay, now that I see that these are highlighted by the algorithm as possibilities, I need to handle these kinds. So if the algorithm says, if the first letter of the first name, middle name, last name is the same, maybe it's a match. That will throw up a huge number of false positives. But then if I find some that are accurate in that, I can build a rule around it. So it's start with something that's very, very vague, that gives you a lot of false positives. Find out which of those false positives are not false positives, or which of that mess is actually not false positives. Build a specific rule around that, iterate, and keep iterating until you have a structure. The list of Hindi, the Hindi matching one that I created was meant for that. But sometimes it's also about the purpose. So when I created that, my objective was not to get it right. My objective was to give the audience the benefit of the doubt. He's guessed the movie kind of right. It's all right if instead of, I don't know, maybe Dil Se, if he types Dil Chahta Hai, close enough, I don't mind. So the purpose to which you use it also matters. If you're going to address a person and put in their financial records, you want accuracy. On the other hand, if you're trying to sell them a new product, you don't need accuracy. So the same organization can, for two different purposes, have a very weak algorithm or a very strong algorithm.
Okay, I have some couple of more questions, but I'll ask them offline.
Yeah, this is Kuldeep. My question is moreover part of the machine learning part, and as we know already that fixing the missing values will give a more value add to the prediction algorithm. My question is, suppose that you have one data set. In one data set, you have one column which is not the any kind of metric data set, which you can fill the missing values by taking the average, by mean and median. I have the data column value as a categorial, and where
As a what?
Categorial data. Like you have grade, employee grade you have, and that is one of the major feature selection for the predictive algorithm. So how we can fill that missing grades values in the data set? So otherwise if we will not fix that, our prediction values will give something else which is not more accurate, as we know.
If I understand you right, you're saying I have grades like A, B, C, D, E, and I
No,
want.
so suppose that we are the employees, right? So we have 1 to 10 grades. And based on the grade, some other features columns also will be there. Based on that, suppose that the appraisal is going to happen. And our prediction model is saying this guy is going to have a 95 percentile of the appraisal. So he should be getting this much percentage of the money. But some of the data in the grade is missing. How you can fill that?
Two possibilities. One is you say, I will try and predict the grade based on other data and then feed it in. The other is build the algorithm in a way that it will handle it even without the grade being present. For example, for all practical purposes, you can say, I'll replace all the missing values with a grade called NA, just not available, and feed it into the algorithm. As far if it were a random forest, it would say NA is one of those that I should put into a branch where the other factors are what really determine the outcome, and the grade itself has very little influence. If there's enough data, the algorithm will train itself on that. Yet another possibility is if you dump it into a neural network with just this as a missing value, then it will handle it. It will just over time learn. However, the other possibility is then you say, I can actually get a reasonable estimate of the grade if I know that the person is in a certain band and I know their salary and I know that the ones in a higher grade tend to have a higher salary. I can estimate the grade here. It makes it inaccurate, but it's a way of filling in the missing data. Ultimately, this boils down to a missing value problem. Two approaches that I see as, when all of the approaches that I mentioned earlier are relevant. First, do nothing. The algorithm may be able to handle it. Second, fill it in with a formula, which could be a small ML algorithm by itself. Third, go ask somebody. People's grades ought to be available. So just tell the HR person, look,
No,
give this person a grade.
Suppose that we have 70,000 plus employees. For every person, if 15,000 employees' grades are missing in the data set. We cannot go and ask every employee that what is your grade.
Thank you.
But that's where the 15,000 is missing out of the 75,000. The 55,000 data we can take and predict the another 15,000 data with the grade based on the another feature selection what we can do. But my question is, suppose that if you're applying a KNN, if you're applying a random forest, have you ever felt that which one will be the good prediction? Because there are many other the algorithms are there in the market which can give the another prediction values.
Okay, this
I
is
applied the XGBoost, but it has given the my 97 percentile. But another way of doing that, you create your own algorithm and predict again for 99 percentile. So have you ever faced that one? That's what.
which algorithm to pick and how is way outside the topic. I'll skip that and we'll take it offline.
No, as part of the data science perspective, I was just checking that if you can get to know that.
I'm an old hand on this. I know enough not to get tricked. I'll answer this offline.
Okay. So